All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be looking at the national dream in Canada, the building of the railway. All right, in 1871, British Columbia joins Confederation with the promise of building a transcontinental railway to link it with the rest of Canada, and particularly Eastern Canada. The idea was there, but the route and how to pay for it was not. Macdonald had a dream to create a nation that would rival the U.S., and the only way to do so would be building a railway. First of all, Macdonald had to find backers, people to help finance the project. The government did not want to build the railway themselves, so they're looking for someone to build it and then get financial benefits from the government. So in other words, hey, you know what? Come in, build it however you want, and we'll give you some benefits. During this period, railways were being built all over the U.S. Many owners were looking for new ways to make money. So in the U.S., there's all kinds of people building private railways. In Canada, they're looking to have one major railway as opposed to a whole bunch of little small ones. American industrialist Jay Cooke, owner of the Northern Pacific Railway, was interested in building a railway. Canadian Sir Hugh Allen was interested but needed American backing. In other words, he wanted to build it, but he didn't have the financial support to do it himself. By 1871, Allen had created the Canadian Pacific Railway. It seemed to be Canadian, but was actually controlled by Cooke and his millions of dollars. They did not intend to build an actual railway through Canada, but to build branch lines from the Northern Pacific. So the original plan was they were going to just have the U.S. railway and then have offshoots going straight up and down into Canada, but obviously that's not going to work for what Macdonald wants. Macdonald calls an election in 1872, and the Conservatives did not have the money, so they asked Allen to fund their election in return for the CPR contract. So in other words, hey, help us buy this election, and we'll give you the contract, which isn't exactly the most above board way of doing it. This made it seem like Macdonald was on Allen's payroll, leading to the Pacific scandal and Macdonald's resignation in 1873. Alexander Mackenzie, he's a liberal, came to power after Macdonald, and he did not agree that Canada needed a railway, so it was kind of put on the back shelf. There's a bit of an economic depression going on in Canada, so that means businesses and that were really slow. So the railway would be such a huge undertaking that the country could not afford. But one thing Mackenzie did is he did allow the survey to continue, so if the economic times got better in Canada, they would be able to continue with the railway. British Columbia, he had joined under the promise of getting this railway. He kind of sits back and goes, hey, what's going on here? You promised a railway, now you're not giving it to us. So they were not happy with Mackenzie, right? And they were threatening to leave and join the U.S. if the railway was not built. All right, so the 1870s continued. Macdonald and his party began to recover and become prominent again. He still thought the railway was needed, but he needed a platform, so he created the national policy. He believed that the policy was the basis for nation building and remained in place into the next century. The areas of the national policy are a system of protective tariffs to protect Canadian goods and make goods from other countries more expensive. Therefore, Canadian manufacturers would sell things. They needed to get more people into Western settlement and the CPR. Now, Western settlement and the CPR go hand in hand together. In order to get the people into the West, they needed the railway to do it. All right, so the tariffs basically protected the Canadian economy from the Americans dumping cheaper goods in Canada. Western settlement, they needed people on the prairies, and the more people that they had on the prairies would keep it from the U.S. trying to take it over, right? And the other thing is the more people on the prairies, more people will buy stuff, and that will help the industrialists in Ontario compete. The CPR, the West couldn't develop. There's no railway, obviously. They needed all the goods from the prairies, the food stuff like that, needed to be transported quickly, and the only viable way to do that was to use a railway, and then they would also be able to connect to the British Empire network as well. Again, 1878 to 1880, they needed to find more people to back the railway. In this time, they found George Stephen from the Bank of Montreal, Donald Smith from the Hudson Bay Company, and James Hill. He invests in railways all over the world. They become known as the CPR Syndicate. So they keep the original CPR name, but now they are known as the CPR Syndicate. 1880, McDonald pitches the idea, giving them the terms they could not refuse. Upon completion, they'd be given $25 million. So all the costs and that, then $25 million here, as well as 25 million acres of land and a monopoly on all rail service in Canada for 20 years, with an exemption from tax and an exemption from taxes until land is sold. So they would not have to pay any taxes or anything on the land until they sold it, as long as they built the railway within 10 years. As you can see here, this is a pretty sweet deal for these guys to do this. And it turns out that they become very rich. You have to understand, in Canada right now, there are two national railways, the CPR and Canadian National. So Canadian National Railway was not allowed to begin until 20 years after the completion of the railway. As soon as the contract was signed, the syndicate changed the route of the railway. So they had originally done with the route that Canadians wanted. They changed the route because what was happening is the land speculators were buying up all the land on the proposed route, and it was causing the land to be more expensive for them to buy, so they moved it 300 kilometers south, and then they got control of all the route, the towns, the stations, everything. The syndicate still had no idea how they would cross the Rockies, and even when construction started and it was going across the prairies, they were still trying to figure out what to do with the Rocky Mountains. They began building the railway in 1881 and only finished 230 kilometers. They realized they needed to change and began looking for a new GM. William Van Horn was hired. He was one of those guys that said, hey, I don't care, no excuses, no anything, this needs to be done. He put in efficiency and led them to get back on schedule. One major problem for the railway was the cost. The builders were not paid until after sections were completed. Also, the cost of building a railway was a lot more than previously thought. So there's always a money issue with the CPR because they didn't get paid until things were done, but they needed money to buy supplies, to pay people, stuff like that. So it was kind of a weird situation going on here. In fact, there had to be multiple financial bailouts before they even got east of Lake Superior. The railway eventually crossed the Rockies at Kicking Horse Pass. CPR saves the nation. In March 1885, the Northwest Rebellion broke out, and the completed portions of the railway were used to transport the troops to Winnipeg in 5 days. Normally, that would have taken a couple of months, but they got them there in 5 days. This event was used to help justify the need for funds to complete the railway, and the railway was finished in 1885, 5 years ahead of schedule. So in 5 years, they managed to build a railway that stretched from coast to coast in Canada. Thank you very much. I will have activities and that for you guys tomorrow in class. Thank you very much and enjoy your day.